30, so I call the meeting of the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel to order. As is the usual situation, the meeting here is both in person and being covered by our friends from PAC TV who are recording the meeting. I don't know if anyone else is planning to record, but if so, given what the open meeting law says, I think you're right, you certainly have a right to do so, but you need to identify the fact that you are. Thanks, Christy. All right, fine. The first item on our agenda is, let me get my cheat sheet. Okay, here we are. Call to order and a roll call of the members. And I'm going to ask the members here to carefully identify who appointed them, because spending some time going through the minutes, there are at least a few circumstances in which the identification in the minutes of who's appointed whom is inconsistent with the specific language of the statute. So I'd like to basically make sure we've got everybody tied to the statute. So if we could start over, I guess, Dave, start all the way over with you.
Dave Noyes, HDI Compliance Manager.
Appointed by?
Holtec.
Thank you.
John Moylan, Site Vice President, Holtec, appointed by Holtec.
Pine Dubois, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Mike Fortini, appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
Mary Gatzlick, appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
Jim Lampert, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Kevin Canty, member of the Plymouth Select Board, appointed to NDCAP by the Plymouth Select Board.
Mary Lampert, appointed by the Senate President.
Mary Lampert, appointed by the Senate President.
Jack Priest, appointed by Robbie Goldstein, Commissioner, Department of Public Health.
Actually, Jack, you're the number one because the statute somehow says that you were appointed by the Bureau of Environmental Health.
That's correct. We're now the Bureau of Climate and Environmental Health under the Department of Public Health.
So you're actually appointed by now the Bureau of Environmental and?
Bureau of Climate and Environmental Health.
Great.
Put your head of it.
Okay.
Seth Pickering. I work at Massachusetts DEP. I was appointed by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Right.
Andrew Gottlieb, appointed by Governor Baker.
Dave Nichols, appointed by Governor Baker.
Okay. So far, we're doing fine. One thing, oh, I'm sorry. I completely forgot. Mary, who's up there?
Which Mary? I'll go Mary Waldron, Old Colony Planning Council, and I believe the Regional Planning Agency is part of the enabling legislation.
Yeah, actually, Old Colony Planning Council is who the statute says you're appointed by.
That's correct. Thank you.
Yeah. Is Kelly up there?
Yep.
Yes, Kelly O'Brien, appointed by Local 369.
And I'm having trouble seeing. Anyway, isn't that all up there? You got it right in front of you in large type.
Yep. We have Wade Gregory.
Oh, Gregory Wade.
Wade, representing the Department of Public Utilities, appointed by the Chair of the Department.
Chris Callahan.
And Chris Callahan.
Chris Callahan, appointed by the EHS Secretary.
I think that's it.
Actually, you have one more. This is Kim Castle. I'm sitting in for David Bryant for MEMA. And
I'm sorry about that. You told me that and I forgot.
MEMA to take his place tonight.
I apologize for forgetting about that. One thing I think probably is worth pointing out is that Mary Gatzlick and I have had some conversations back and forth, including with the Attorney General, on some questions that have arisen. Really, they're on the administrative side. And one of them is, as you all recall, the statute requires to do anything, a vote of the entire majority. So I went back and forth with the AG's office on what does that mean. And the advice I received back was that means a majority of all 21, even though we now have 4 vacancies and there are only 17, which means that to pass anything, we need 11 votes. And I think that in the past, I've made the assumption, I think others have made the assumption that with a reduced membership because of vacancies, that number was decreased. Unfortunately, that's not what the AGO's office tells me. Any questions?
Until they listen to the Zoom and hear what he said.
Jim, can you repeat that, what we need to pass?
We need 11.
11 out of
We
17.
have, according to the statute, we have 21 members, and the Attorney General has told me that the requirement, and that the statute says, is a majority of the entire membership, means all 21, even though we have vacancies, and that's consistent with a number of other decisions that they cited, and I'm sure nobody wants me to go back and bother to read.
Just for the record, could you say the 4 vacancies that we have?
Surely. 4 vacancies we have, and if I'm wrong on any of this, please correct me. We have a vacancy for the designee of the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. We have a vacancy for a member of the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Committee. We have a vacancy now on the Plymouth Select Board because Henrietta Costantino, who had been the second appointment, has resigned because she is moving to Chicago to live closer to her family. And we also have 1 vacancy for an appointee of the President of the Senate. Does anybody think that's wrong in any aspects? If so, let's try to get it cleared up.
I think you're right. There's like one ex officio and then 4 vacancies.
Actually,
Sorry, that's not what I wanted to grab.
yeah, we have the ex officio as the Secretary of Housing Development. We simply don't have it.
This one, and this one, and this one. So, yeah, we got them all.
Yeah, we have a total of 4 vacancies. Okay.
So have we reached out to them, a letter or something to say we've got those vacancies and?
I think we have in the past. I have not recently. I guess the Plymouth Select Board has probably 2 to figure out how to handle the Nuclear Matters Committee and Henrietta Costantino's seat.
So the Select Board is, I believe, currently advertising Ms. Constantino's former seat. The Nuclear Matters Committee was unable to sustain membership for a prolonged period and has not operated for some time, so I don't know that that one is going to re-emerge, but that is a separate issue. But we are certainly going to be filling the other seat when we are able to do so.
And I will take it to notify the President of the Senate's office and the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. Moving on, the next item is, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, the public is having trouble getting on through Zoom. There's no broken link.
Oh, brother.
I don't know, it's the link that's on the mass.gov website. So is there a way we can get that fixed so that other people can get on that don't know how to?
I assume the people you're just talking to are working to try to get it fixed.
Huh?
You were just,
She can't, because it's on the state's website.
okay.
It's the
Who
link
wants to
provided
take
on the
responsibility for
website.
the state's website?
So I don't know if there's another way to fix it.
Yeah,
I just
top-
wanted you to know that's why I was jumping.
Oh, thank you very much. Fortunately, it doesn't affect the meeting because the way the state law on virtual participation says that we don't terminate things if we have what they refer to as technological problems that interrupt the virtual broadcast. but we certainly have to figure out who's responsible and how we can get it fixed. Note taken.
Yeah, you get an uh-oh when you go on the friendly link.
Noted. That brings us to the minutes of the last meeting. I hope people have had a chance to review them. Any comments on the minutes?
My only comment is asking you to add the page number to the bottom of the sheet. Makes it a lot easier when people are referring to the meeting minutes.
Yeah, I will make that note. You know, these are, people who don't know, these are prepared by the state. There is a paralegal who prepares them, and I will admit that I do not envy her that job because it is not an easy one. And they send them to me, and do they send them to you on the initial draft?
Yep. I can add the meeting.
Yeah, if one of us forgets, let's make sure we
Yep, I'll
add the page,
That's the
add
only
the
thing my
page.
comment is.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Mrs. Lambert?
Yes. On the second page, 2 down, Mrs. Lambert asked Mr. Noyes what kind of testing was conducted. What I would like in there, he did say surface only, 6 to 8 inches below the surface. Then I asked who gets the results, and there was no answer. But I think it's important to have surface only, 6 to 8 inches below the surface, because that was at time 18.
I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of the minutes with me. That was in relation to what testing?
Excavation. The line reads, Mrs. Lambert asked Mr. Noyes what kind of testing was conducted during excavation. If you listen to the tape at 18, you will hear surface only, 6 to 8 inches below the surface.
Excuse me, I'm not seeing this in the minutes.
Well, it's not in the minutes, that's the point.
No, is it not here at all?
Yeah,
You're not
correct.
pointing to a paragraph in the minutes.
Yeah, they don't have, the detail of 6 to 8 inches below the surface is missing. It would be informative to those perhaps who aren't informed of the details to know that.
Yeah, I guess my question is, in what paragraph should this be inserted? Asked, okay, gotcha. Second paragraph. Okay, we will,
And then,
hearing no objection.
then in the
Well,
mid,
I just have to clarify that 6 inches below the surface means below the exposed surface. So it's not 6 inches below the grade level, it's 6 inches below the surface that is exposed from removal of the tanks.
I didn't hear that word, but I could care less. You add it,
Okay,
fine.
I just want to be accurate.
Yeah, but you could check on 18 minutes. Also, at 28 minutes, I would like more detailed, it's like halfway down the page, Mrs. Lambert expressed her environmental concerns related to gaseous releases and their impacts on Cape Cod Bay. It went into determination of wind, and the reply, this is not in the minutes, was a reliance on a 10-year average during license renewal. That the winds are offshore. And I think that's important to add.
Just so we have it on the tape, could you give us again exactly what you'd like added?
Mary, could you get the microphone closer to you?
Oh, yeah, it's a notebook's in the way. Yes. It was about winds. At 28 minutes, I asked how Holtec was determining wind direction. The reply was, we rely on a 10-year average done, on a study done during license renewal.
I remember that.
In fact, if you want more detail, it was a study by Dr. Okula and Mr. Hanna from Harvard.
It's on the second page, about halfway
on
down.
the second page.
Directly above for waste disposal.
And then, a little bit further down, Mr. Noyes stated that there were 895,000 gallons of water on the refueling floor. Did you mean 935, 850?
I guess my,
Mr. Noyes?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. What?
You stated there were 895 gallons of water on the refueling floor at time 40.
Yes, 895,000 gallons is accurate.
Okay.
any other comments?
Well, you're getting bored? I have lots more.
Well, if there are corrections to the, additions to the minutes, let's hear them.
At 51 minutes, this is the second line down, Mr. Lampert asked, what was the HDI overhead fund?
Yep.
At the end, what wasn't added to the minutes was Noyes said he was not aware of any state that was left to pay. And there have been states that had to pay for subsequent cleanups, such as Maine Yankee, Yankee Row, Connecticut Yankee, San Diablo, and San Onofre.
Is that in the minutes?
No.
In the tape?
Those were not in the minutes.
Okay, so it's just what Mr. Noyes said.
It's just what, the only thing that wasn't in the minutes was the fact that he said, Noyes said, not aware of any state left to pay.
Okay.
And
Got
that's
it.
an incorrect statement.
I
It's
got it.
important.
No, it's an absolutely correct statement.
Oh, it's correct that you weren't aware.
I am not aware of any. I am
Yes.
not aware of any, that's what I said.
Okay, and I subsequently sent him some information.
Excuse me, we're just going over, we can get into the substance of discussions later, as I think is in our practice, if something said was incorrect, but at the moment, I only want to make sure that we have in the minutes additions of what actually was said.
Yeah, exactly. At the next page, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph down, Mr. Gottlieb, this is not in the minutes, at 1:15, 1 minute 15. Andrew asked Noyes to send someone to NDCAP who knew finances to provide detail and answer questions. Dave made no response. I would like that in the minutes because I think it's important that we continue with that.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. We'll take care of getting those entered into the minutes.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think on page 3, third paragraph, there's a typo. Mr. Noyes indicated that this depends on the temperature at which, rather than the temperate.
Yep.
Temperature at which each particulate would be released from the water? Okay, temperature.
Dave, that would be correct, wouldn't it?
That is correct.
I have a couple of corrections, I guess basically with respect to Seth, Pickering, Chris Callahan, to, and probably to Jack, to just correct who the appointing authority actually was. We talked about that a moment ago. And probably more important thing on the minutes is another subject that Ms. Katzlik and I had a lot of conversations with the Attorney General and other people. The open meeting law says, among other things, that the minutes must include a list of all documents and exhibits used at the meeting. Lovely phrase, so the question to the Attorney General was, What does that mean? And the advice I received a week ago, let's start off, the law doesn't define it. But at a minimum, it is clear that where a document is physically present, verbally identified, and the contents are discussed by members of a public body during an open meeting, it has been used for purposes of the open meeting law. Physically present, verbally identified, and discussed. Referenced, she says that the AGO has found previously that if documents are referenced, physically present, and contents discussed and voted upon, even if the discussions were brief, those also were used. So where does that leave us? I think it leaves us, and anybody who has any different views, please express them, that we need to add to the minutes a list of all documents that anybody read or quoted from at the meeting. And if you go through the minutes, you will see, particularly when we get to public comment, there is a long list of statements that were read. I think those need to be included in the meeting. I notice that also we have not included in the meeting a copy of a slide presentation I made when we were getting into a discussion of the requirements of the open reading law and Mr. Noy's complaints. Yes, Ms. Gatsley?
Actually, it was my understanding when I talked to Carrie that.
Carrie Bean?
I'm sorry, the woman who does our meeting minutes.
Yep.
It would be the stuff that the panel discussed, not the stuff that in the public comment. So there's the difference there.
Basically, as of the moment, I'm going to err on the side of caution. I see no reason not to include information that was aired at the meeting, regardless of who may have aired it and talked about it. We intentionally provide 30 minutes for public comment and questions. That is part of the meeting. And as I read the Attorney General's advice, I think those should be included. I think the more difficult problem we have is that the open meeting law also says that we're supposed to keep records. I mean, copies of all of this stuff. So I am going to ask both panel members and people who read something to us, please provide us with a copy so we can put it into what is supposed to be the public record of these proceedings. That's what the statute says.
So does that mean that we need to discuss every public comment?
No.
So that it's discussed? Because otherwise it's just, somebody's opinion, basically.
Well, so are a lot of other things.
I don't see that the presentations that are made to the NDCAP are opinions. They're, the work that has been done, the tests that have been performed, and that sort of thing. I don't think it's, it's not public. I've never experienced that, Jim, and I've been on public boards for a really long time.
Yes,
I've
as
never
have I.
experienced that.
As have I, but which is why I was frankly somewhat surprised by the AG's response. But you'll notice this listing of her ands was clearly at a minimum. I frankly cannot see any good reason not to include this in the listing, and to the extent that we can acquire them, to have the statements made by the public as part of the record that people can view so they will understand what's going on at this meeting. And that's the practice I intend to follow.
May I add that I am in favor of that, particularly because it was decided to have the annual report be slapping the minutes on and include also Holtec's show and tells. And so I think it's very important that those who receive, if the pattern continues, that when people look at the minutes who are supposedly to be educated, also get other facts, other opinions, and certainly a lot that I hear out of this panel are opinions.
Mr. Chairman, I want to move this along, but I think it might be easier for the panel and the state if we just ask people to submit a digital copy if they're going to be submitting anything in record. And then you've got
I
an
am,
electronic version of it. that can
believe
be
me,
stored.
I am always happy to get a digital copy as opposed to piles of paper. But, and I assume that most people who are making statements here do have it in an electronic copy in this day and age, so I think it's a very good suggestion.
There's also an email that's on the website that is supposed to go to the chairman, the handicap board, so we need to get access to that. They can send it to that email, digital copies.
Yep.
That's part of the website.
All right. Shall we move on? Mr. Noyes?
Do you want to take a motion on the minutes or anything?
If someone wants to make a motion, I am certainly, I don't believe, in a position to say that you can't. I basically have this, what I said is, I think I outlined the practice that I intend to follow. And if somebody wants to make a motion to the effect that I do something else, we'll see whether there are 11 votes in favor of that motion.
This is just to approve the meeting minutes.
Right.
Sorry, Pine, I misunderstood you.
That's okay.
Okay, Mr.
I
Noyes.
apologize. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have to take a roll call.
Yeah, we got to take a roll call here. Okay, Mr. Candy moved. And the second was Mary Gatzley. Help you keep track of the count.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Noyes?
Yes.
Mr. Moylan?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Bois?
Yes.
Mr. Fortini?
Yes.
Ms. Gatzley?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Mrs. Lampert?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Pickering?
Yes.
Mr. Wade?
Not having attended the meeting either, I will abstain as well.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Ms. Waldron?
Yes.
I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I see, I have 13 in favor, the motion passes.
Yep, I have that.
I have that as well.
Okay, Dave, we made it to you.
All right, so our July update, the first item is the waterfall chart, which shows the swim lanes or process lanes for work activities. The majority of them are covered in the slide deck. One of them that is not is the first one, which is characterization and submission of the license termination plan. We're coming up on the formal submittal of the license termination plan, scheduled to be submitted the end of September.
Of this year?
Of this year, yes.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
As part of the license termination process, we have submitted draft copies of the LTP chapters to the NRC. They've been performing reviews and providing comments on the content of those. The end of the LTP review process will, prior to the actual submittal, will conclude in a public meeting that the NRC will hold locally to identify the comments that they provided back to the licensee on the LTP submittal. It's currently scheduled for the end of August.
So you're submitting and when?
Excuse me? The end of August will be the public meeting.
And when are you submitting this to them?
We're submitting it in September.
I guess I'm a little confused on the meeting before the submission.
So the meeting before the submission provides the lists of comments that they've provided us on the draft chapters.
Gotcha.
In
Okay.
accordance with their process. You can see that underlying the LTP submission is the site characterization, which continues. So that site characterization is dynamic as we begin to remove some of the foundations on site beyond the superstructures associated with the buildings. We will continue concrete bores and some of the subsurface sampling that will support the DCGL development and the determination of the LTP chapter content. For the ISFAC, just continue to maintain the casks within their secure area and monitor the planting. We're coming up on the final planting or the final verification of the plantings as part of the agreement that was set with the state. And the remaining lanes, with the exception of site restoration, are covered in the contents of the slide. Site restoration will pick up following the completion of the demolition of the buildings in 2034.
Dave, could you explain what a DCGL is to the panel?
I'm not sure exactly what the acronym is, but it's the level of radioactivity associated with specific isotopes that would establish an acceptance standard for cleanup and for what can be left.
Just given print size and old eyes, is that anywhere, DCGL anywhere on this waterfall? I don't see it on the waterfall.
It's not in the
It's not.
waterfall, so I think what Dave said, as part of the site characterization, they are using data from the, as part of the site characterization, they're using data that they're obtaining from core bores and sampling to come up with the DCGLs, which are concentration guide limits. So that won't be in the waterfall, that would be part of the site characterization plan, correct?
Yep,
That's
that's
right.
correct. And my recollection is that there are DCGL figures, at least for some models, in the current
So say it's,
ESA.
ask the question, I'll answer it.
In which?
The 2024 ESA, the one you submitted in February.
There's the methodology for development of DCGLs. I don't believe that
There's
there
a
are
table,
any
there's a table
DCGL
either in the
values.
2022 or the 2024, and I don't remember off the top of my head, that has DCGLs for 2 of the models.
Okay.
Question, isn't the issue for the state an agreement of less than 10? So how does that relate?
Well, the state agreement is less than 10 millirem per year to an individual that resides on the property. And under the resident farmer scenario, that individual would be the most exposed individual for somebody that was growing crops, gaining water from a well on the property, in addition to the radiological exposure. DCGLs are part of the MARSIM process, and they determine the thresholds of specific radionuclides because those radionuclides provide an energy level over time, and not all radionuclides disintegrate at the same rate.
Well, that's all very true, but the bottom line is 10, correct?
For the state agreement.
For the site.
Right, but DCGLs need to be developed, and those DCGLs need to be approved as part of the final status survey and the NRC's acceptance of the final state.
Is that how it's done?
That's correct. So so let's just say we're looking for a DCGL for cobalt. All right, so they will use that model. They use that, MARSIMS is the methodology that's standard and approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's the decommissioning model that's used on any decommissioning. So for cobalt, they'll take their samples, they'll come up with a DCGL that essentially equates, if the concentration is below that DCGL, then they will meet that 10 millirem criteria.
For anyone who is really interested, the table of DCL values that I was referring to is calculated values for building surface and soil, not, I would note, basement inventory, and it's on page 6 of the February 2024 revised ESA.
And the basement inventory will have its own DCGLs based on the results of the analysis that we do when we do core bores.
So they'll be added to that table.
Yes.
Okay.
So the bottom line is they'll come up with this set of DCGLs. That'll be a table of limits, a table of cannot exceed to demonstrate that they meet that unrestricted release criteria.
The state 10 milligram.
That's correct. Questions?
Dave, could you go back a slide?
Yep.
I have a couple of questions on this slide. I don't know whether anybody else does. I guess my first question is up in the upper right-hand corner. I can't read a single one of those dates or words. What do they say and what are the dates?
So the specific dates in the upper right-hand corner are the final site release. So partial site release governs the period of time.
Yeah, all I want to know is what does it say and what are the numbers?
I'll get you a copy of it with the values expanded. I don't have a copy
Because
of it.
I tried to blow it up and then it got even fuzzier.
Yeah, no, I can provide you with detail of exactly what those dates are.
Yeah,
what
and
the
frankly, if
categories are.
this is obviously in your computer, if some way in futures, after these presentations, those could be made bigger, I think it would be a lot of help to old eyes.
Okay. We'll take
And-
that and,
And just two other questions. Could you explain in the next to last, what does waste management encompass?
it encompasses the removal of material from the site. So anything that is being disposed of as radiological material, and any non-radiological material that needs to be controlled, whether it be oil or hazardous material, asbestos, PCBs, other material.
Doesn't have anything to do with the spent fuel, is that correct?
It does not. The spent fuel is tracked at the very top, where those things are that you said that were difficult to read. That is what's credited in the PSDAR is the final removal and site release of the fuel, but that's up in that top corner.
And in the last line, which is site restoration, could you explain what earthwork encompasses?
One of the requirements of restoration is that anything that is not approved to the contrary needs to go back to its original grade level. So earthwork would be grading the site area back to the original surveys prior to construction of the plant.
So basically 1967 levels.
That's correct.
And restoration encompasses what? Because I've seen various statements in the PSDAR, et cetera.
Yeah, restoration is meeting both the state and the federal standard.
Yeah,
And either removal of any material under the beneficial use determination process.
Yeah,
or
let me
it's
ask a question here, and we may, when we get a little farther, get this tied up. My recollection is that in the PSDAR, you specified in some detail precisely what restoration would encompass. Has that changed?
It has not.
Speaking of waste, do you have information of the use in concrete of asbestos? I understand it was very common to mix asbestos into concrete at the time Pilgrim was built.
We are aware of that, and any concrete demolition that we do, we sample for asbestos.
Well, what about parts that you are not taking out, like the basement area?
They would be sampled as well.
And if they had asbestos, they go?
They have to be verified to either be free of oil or hazardous material, or they have to be approved by the state to be left under a beneficial use determination.
Okay, and do you have the original plans, building plans?
There are several standards and plans. We have all the records for fabrication of the plant.
DEP has them? Well, shouldn't DEP have copies of them?
I don't know why they would.
Well, to be able to figure out what has asbestos and what doesn't,
They'll-
and all that stuff.
We'll
Just-
sample and submit the results of the
No,
sample.
a sample is only a portion, though.
Dave, do the original plans show the concrete mix, whether or not it includes asbestos?
It provides a standard, an ASTM or.
No, I'm not talking
mill
about a standard, I'm talking about the actual mix.
No, it does not.
Okay? Excuse me, go on.
All right, so for demolition activities, we have removed the 2 remaining underground storage tanks. These were 2 25,000-gallon steel tanks that were part of the heating system for the plant. They provided oil storage for the house heating boilers. Those are no longer required, and they are the last 2 of 8 tanks that, underground storage tanks that have been removed from the site. Also ongoing is removal of the previous emergency planning zone sirens. So 4 of the 113 sirens in what used to be the EPZ communities have been removed. We've engaged with a local vendor to perform that work. We are coordinating with local law enforcement for traffic details where they're necessary, and we will complete removal of all of the sirens by the end of this year.
So including the 109 that have not been removed?
Yes, yeah, that will be the entire population of the 113.
Okay, and what do you mean by traffic details?
In some cases, police details are required because the parking of the trucks obscure free access down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Circled in the upper left-hand corner are those 2 remaining fuel oil tanks, the auxiliary boiler tanks. So those have been removed. There are no buildings that are currently undergoing active demolition, so the buildings that remain are the ones that are to remain, which is the support building and the below-grade portion of the intake structure, and the process buildings, which consists of the reactor building, turbine building, and the augmented off-gas building. For reactor internal segmentation, we're closing in on the completion of removing all of the internals associated with the reactor vessel. 3 of 4 feedwater spargers have been removed. The 4th sparger has been removed. There's 1 section of hangar that is left to be removed, and we are tooling for that activity. We are also continuing on with demobilization of the segmentation effort in order to support the dismantlement of the reactor vessel internals. We needed to put a number of steel plates and I-beams in order to be able to support the machinery and other pieces of equipment that were needed for segmentation. So we're in the process of removing those, surveying them, and readying them for disposal. The drain down of the water in the reactor cavity and dryer separator pit, approximately 425,000 gallons of water, is scheduled to be drained to the Taurus this fall.
And am I right that water will then remain only in the Taurus and in the spent fuel pool?
Well, there is water in motion at times in rad waste collection systems, and some water that has yet to be drained in other systems on site. But of the water that we have been discussing, the large quantities of water, those will be the only 2 locations of water on site.
And if my math is right from the table that you sent Mrs. Lampert a week or so ago, some 460,000 gallons will remain in the spent fuel pool. Is that accurate?
Yes, right around that number, yes.
Stay constant over time?
Excuse me?
Does that number stay constant over time?
The amount of water?
In the spent fuel pool?
No, it's subject to evaporation.
But do you replenish it at that point from the Taurus?
We do, but not within a tight range. So When we were operating, there was a specific limit for maintaining that water level because we were concerned about reactor or fuel criticality. So and for cooling, that water was required to be at a specific level. We may operate with a foot difference in level and then just do batch makeup.
And the function that that water serves during the 8-year hiatus when there's not a lot of work being done there is what?
Is for the waste that is currently stored there and to be packaged.
And so,
all of the waste that has been segmented in the dryer separator pit and then is being ready to be put into staging casks to be stored outside will go into the spent fuel pool until following the drain down until we conduct a waste campaign to move all of that material out to our waste staging area.
and is the packaging and removal of that being done on a as rapid as possible basis, or is it on some other schedule?
We don't have a firm schedule for it yet.
So it's staying there for an indefinite period of time so that you can keep it wet?
Until we have a schedule, yeah.
And what's impeding you from getting that schedule?
Just the development of it. Each segmentation of every piece of metal that comes out of there needs to be determined how to optimize that package to reduce the number of shipments that are required, that are associated with it, and that's a fairly long and involved process.
And that'll consume 8 years?
I don't know how long it will consume.
Okay.
Dave?
Yeah.
You just might also want to just point out to people the volume of water that will remain in the vessel?
Yes,
The
yeah.
reactor vessel
Yeah,
as
thank
well?
you. So approximately 100,000 gallons will remain within the reactor vessel proper. So the draining of the reactor cavity is just down to the reactor vessel flange. And we won't drain the reactor vessel until we're ready to segment the reactor vessel. Thank
That
you.
timing at the moment is out in when, 2032 or something?
Yes, yeah, between 2032 and 2034.
So, if I might, is the driver for that schedule the previously cited regulatory uncertainty?
It was, there were two drivers. The first 4-year pause was caused by the poor market performance that impacted the growth of the, expected growth of the decommissioning fund, a higher than expected cost of labor, and uncertainty associated with the ability to process the water. The second 4 years was solely due to uncertainty with disposition of the water.
Right, but now that you have certainty in the form of a denial, doesn't that allow you to recoup 4 to 6 years of that 8-year delay?
I'm not sure that where we're at in the process is final.
It's final if you accept the answer you've been given. The only uncertainty that remains would be that which is potentially created by your own choice to appeal. You've got an answer from the state. You could take that answer and say the uncertainty is resolved and stop penalizing the people of Plymouth for the additional 6-year delay. I mean, that's entirely your choice.
We could, but the same justification for saying that the discharge of water in liquid form was the most environmentally responsible way to be able to deal with the water still exists.
But you lost the regulatory argument. So your opinion at that point, frankly, doesn't much matter.
There are still avenues available to us, should we decide to pursue them, in order to be able to still consider the option of liquid discharge.
Which are what?
Which are an appeal.
Yep.
And then future litigation.
So
what about the biggie, evaporation? Because that's you are sending untreated water up, and within 8 years, everything but a flask probably would be sent off the vent.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that this panel member is finished, and you haven't been recognized, Mary.
I appreciate that reminder.
I just want to be clear that the choice to create additional time uncertainty is utterly and completely Holtec's at this juncture. You have a permit determination. You don't like it. Too bad. If you then appeal it, you're creating the circumstances that cause additional delay. One might reasonably wonder then if that delay is intended to be used to allow time for the water to be evaporated to solve your problem in another form. That's a fair question that deserves an answer. So let's not pretend going forward that if that 8-year hold on timing sticks, that it's not because you chose it and you're asking the people of Plymouth, Southeast Massachusetts, to bear the burden of that decision on your part. You have certainty. You can act on it. You could do the right thing. I've heard you say in the past you're not going to. I heard you allude very clearly to the fact you're not likely to tonight, although you haven't quite said it. And I think that's an opportunity, an inflection point for Holtec to play a better corporate citizen role, take the answer you've been given, shorten the schedule, and get on with figuring out another way to dispose of this water. I'm done.
Nothing has changed with our assessment of the most environmentally responsible way to disposition the water.
The question was whether your choice to do it is legal or not. The Commonwealth has opined that it's not. So you can tell everybody as much as you want that you think it's a better idea. It's not legal.
You could say the same thing with respect to the initial letter that was provided by the state that prohibited the discharge and the interim determination. That, I mean, you could say those were the same inflection points.
Anyway, I'm not even sure I understand what you're talking about. What I'm talking about is you have a permit decision now that says something, it gives you clear guidance. Whether you pursue it to fight it or not for your own internal reasons is a calculus you have to make. But there is no permit uncertainty anymore. You can create it, but as of today, it's a resolved issue.
Just to be sure, Mr. Chairman, I disagree with my panel member, the voice of.
I expect there may be a number of disagreements on this panel on a lot of issues, but if we can basically just let people say what they want to say now and then move on, but thank you, fine, for briefing. Mrs. Lampert, you had a comment? Or Jack, do you?
I do not.
The only comment I had is, I know from our stockbroker, we get regular reports, how much the investments went up, how much they went down. You get regular reports, right? So,
yes, we do.
how much has it gone up over the past year?
I don't know. I don't have the last.
And
year's
so
data.
perhaps when the request to get someone in here who understands the answers to questions on finances, hopefully at the next meeting, we can get that kind of information to see whether it's very feasible to get on with the show a lot quicker.
If you have specific questions of a financial nature, we'll certainly entertain those. I'm not going to make a request of Holtec or HDI to bring in somebody that is a financial expert, but if you have specific questions, we'd be happy to try and get them answered for you.
I asked a bunch last meeting about overhead rates and the change in charging based on the slowdown in rates of activity, and to date have heard no response.
Yeah, I don't remember them specifically in detail. I'm sure I can pull them out, but if you have specific questions, if you could put them in writing, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Andrew, I think that would be useful to the panel if we collectively put a set of questions together. We can enter them into the minutes, provide them to Holtec, and ask them to respond to it.
Fine, I'll route
And then-
mine to the rest of the panel through the chair.
Thank you.
So for regulatory update, we did receive, as Mr. Gottlieb said, the final denial regarding the permit. We are evaluating next steps. Should we choose to appeal, we have 30 days in order to file that appeal. Mass DEP also issued.
Dave, could you just clarify to whom that appeal would be?
It would be to Mass DEP.
That's my understanding, but I think, not sure a lot of people understand that.
Can I follow up with that, Mr. Chair? Does that mean that your determination about whether you appeal is through the DEP administrative process, or are you planning to argue federal preemption and go to federal court?
No, the first step in the process would be the appeal that is part of the determination that Mass DEP issued.
Thank you.
Sorry, and Dave, do you have a timeline of what's the clock? Maybe Seth's going to do it, but what the clock is on how long you have before you have to appeal?
30 days.
30 days since the decision.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mass DEP also issued an evaluation of the potential to emit analysis. Mass DEP had requested us to perform a potential to emit analysis for the waters in the refuel floor volumes. They have issued a determination that the emissions are determined to be below the air pollution control regulation thresholds, which is what we had established in our evaluation. We are also preparing the NEPDES and surface water discharge permit renewals. The permit expires, the current permit expires in 2025. So prior to December 30th of this year, we'll be submitting the permit renewal.
And just for clarity, I assume you were speaking of the 2020 permits.
That is the one that's coming up
The
on
one
its
that you, the
5-year
one that you are
expiration.
presently seeking to amend, is that
That's
accurate?
correct, yep.
So what's the scope of that amendment? What are you seeking?
It hasn't been fully developed yet.
Wait a minute. A little confusion here. Are you talking about renewing the 2020 permits in their present form, which explicitly forbid dumping water from such things as the spent fuel pool? Or are you talking about submitting another request for amendment by the end of December?
Permit renewals always looks at the circumstances associated with the power plant as it exists today. For instance, there are 2 outfalls that are associated with the power plant under the 2020 permit that are no longer required under the current configuration. So we would look to update the permit to remove outfalls that are no longer in place, and if any other changes need to be made, those would be included in the submission.
What are the potential changes, and what activities are you looking to have authorized on a continuing basis past expiration?
We haven't had detailed discussions on that yet. It
Okay.
may very well include the addition of outfall 15, which was part of the amendment request.
Okay, so it's July, almost August, and you're
Yeah.
submitting an application in December.
Yes.
And you don't know what the scope and range of what your activities are that you're looking to
Not
permit?
in that detail, no.
Okay, that doesn't strike me as plausible on its face.
For site source term reduction, waste management, we have to date this year transported 15,244 cubic feet of material to the WCS facility in Andrews, Texas for disposal. That material included a total activity of 32 curies, bringing the project to just under 2,000 curies of material and over 250,000 cubic feet.
And just as a matter of curiosity, you say to date, is that as of literally today? I kind of doubt it, to early end of June, which would have been at least.
It's accurate. It was as of last week, but we haven't
Thank
shipped
you.
anything this week, so. And that completes the presentation, pending any additional questions.
I have one question. You mentioned draft chapters that had been submitted for the LTP.
Yes.
Where are they available for the public to look at?
They're not available for the public to view yet.
And so when there's a NRC meeting, we all go in cold?
And the NRC will provide the information that they provided back to us in feedback, yes.
Prior to the meeting?
I don't know. I'm not sure what their process calls for.
Can you tell us with whom you're dealing so we could touch there?
Yeah.
That's our project manager, Marlena Dole.
No, I meant at the
At
NRC.
NRC.
Yes. Our project manager, Marlena Dole.
Oh, she's an NRC employee?
Yes, she is.
Marlena Dole, thank you.
That's ridiculous.
Have any more questions for Mr. Noyes?
I have a slight question about the intake structure that remains.
Yeah.
Is that all concrete vault kind of thing? Is that
No,
like
that's what I'm saying.
There is some piping below grade.
The question had to do with the intake structure, part of which below grade, I think was the quote, is going to remain. So is that a concrete type vault? Is there piping in it? What does it consist of that will remain?
It is a concrete type vault. There is piping in it. We haven't made decisions on the final configuration of that piping. Any piping that would remain would be filled to prevent a potential collapse hazard later on. So the piping would be filled with flowable fill, appropriate flowable fill material.
Well, as usual, I have a few questions if no one else does. Dave, you sent Mrs. Lampert about 11 days ago a table showing the amount of water in cavity, spent fuel pool, dryer separator, Taurus, and CST that I, and start off, let's be simple. What's CST? I think I know, but tell me.
It's condensate storage tanks.
That's what I assumed. And what the volume was at the end, basically at the end of June for each of 6 successive years. You have that table in front of you?
I do.
Okay. Do I correctly understand that's what this is?
That's exactly what this is, yes.
Okay. Obviously, there are decreases in the total over those years. Is the majority of that decrease the result of evaporation? Because it's a decrease of about 800,000 gallons, 900,000 gallons.
Yeah, all of it is,
It's all evaporation?
yes.
And is it fair to take from this table that water from the CST and the Taurus has been used to keep the cavity, spent fuel pool, and DSP up at the desired levels?
Yes.
At one of the last meetings, actually some time ago, I think we were asked if you could provide how much water you have actually added to keep the spent fuel pool at the desired level. Have you been able to get that information together?
I don't recall the question. I don't have that
I
specific
can-
information.
The question was asked, no
Okay,
recollection.
if you'd renew it, I'll have the question for the last meeting or prior to.
Okay, I think it was either the last or prior to. And about, last November, you were asked to go back and look at all of your models and see if you could give us your best estimate of evaporation rates over the next 4 or 8 years. Did you go back and give it a try?
Yes, and I still was unable to, because of the issue associated with a lowering level in the spent fuel pool. It's almost impossible with the variables of ventilation and humidity to be able to assess what that evaporation is going to look like over time.
If you look at the table that you sent Mrs. Lampert, it's basically a June to June table. So that period of time would include the entirety of the heating period, if I understand this correctly. The June 22 to June 23 would be the period that you started heating, I believe, in November of 22, sometime into the spring of 23, and the June 23 to June 24 would have been, I think, encompassing the entire period you used supplemental heaters over that period. Is that accurate?
Makes sense, yes.
If my math is right, the total amount of water evaporated in each of those 2 periods was around 110 to 125,000 gallons. You can subtract if you want to, but I'm fairly sure of those numbers.
Yeah, I think that looks about right.
Is there any reason, granted you're doing this without a computer and God knows what else, that we should not reasonably expect that if you continue to heat in the future, as you have over the last 2 years, that the evaporation will be somewhat a little north of 100,000 gallons a year?
I don't think that that's an accurate assessment because of the reason that I just said. As you lower water in the pool, there's less interaction between the ventilation on the floor and the surface of the water. And that's a large decider in how much water
I hear that,
evaporates.
but I've also heard you say that you make up the water in the pool, so the level of the water in the pool does not significantly go down.
But at some point, you're not going to make up the level of water in the pool anymore.
When will that happen? 8 years from now, because you don't have enough water left?
When we're done handling waste.
And that is out in 32 or 34, if I'm correct.
We haven't got a schedule for completion of the waste that's in the spent fuel pool.
So let's make it simple. The next 2 years, is there any reason we should not expect, within a plus or minus of some level, roughly 100 to 110,000 gallons of evaporation?
I don't think that's accurate as well. A large portion, and let me tell you why. A large portion of the evaporation comes from natural evaporation based on the total surface area. When we drain down the dryer separator pit and the reactor cavity, and the only portion of water on the refuel floor that's subjected to evaporation is going to be about 1/4 of the surface area, because we're no longer going to be flooded up, with the exception of the spent fuel pool. So that amount of evaporation is going to go significantly down, that natural evaporation.
So I think you're telling me that when you drain the SFP and the cavity, the rate of evaporation will drop because they will no longer be evaporating. Is that accurate?
The dryer separator pit and cavity, yes.
Dryer separator.
Right.
I misspoke.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any
No, not quite yet.
All right.
And you haven't been able to come up with the models.
No.
Have you been, and I will send you again the question that was asked at the last meeting about the amount that's been added to each of the spent fuel pool, et cetera. One other question. I sent you an email before the last meeting in which I had quoted what Dr. Singh had told Senator Markey, now what, I guess about 15 months ago. And what he had said basically is the company will never fail, and I'm quoting, never fail to fulfill its contractual obligation. This is a commitment from me, and I am the founder. We will not, no matter what happens down the road, we will not breach our obligation to the counterparties. Senator Markey. So it's very important that we have an understanding that the parent company will accept full responsibility. I don't know Mr. Schofield, Seth Schofield from the Attorney General's office, if there's some way we can formalize that, but I think it would be important. I think it would be very important for the people of Plymouth to have a legal document. Do I correctly understand that there is no such legal document?
There is none that I'm aware of.
When I asked you prior to the last meeting whether Holtec International would guarantee payments if they led forth, if the fund ran short, your answer was, we will not let Pilgrim fail. That struck me as a little ambiguous. What do you mean by fail?
Well, Dr. Singh's on record as
Yeah,
saying
I mean,
that
that's
we
my
will
que-
meet
my
our
question was,
obligation,
what
that
do you
Holtec
mean
will
by
meet its
fail?
obligation.
My question is, what do you mean by fail? Do you mean by fail that you will continue to give it money to pay the decommissioning bills, or do you mean something else?
Holtec will complete the work.
And Holtec will pay to complete the work.
Holtec will ensure that the work gets completed. I'm not trying to be evasive in any way, but Dr. Singh's been very clear that Holtec stands behind the decommissioning of Pilgrim Station, and it will be completed.
I don't doubt that the work will be completed, My question, and I think it's the question of probably everybody here tonight, is will the cost of completing the work be paid by Holtec? Well, fine, it's mine.
Yeah, I think it's asked and answered. I think
I
Dr.
don't think
Singh
it's been answered. I think that
Dr.
not letting
Singh
them
has
fail
answered
does
it.
not answer the question. If you can get us a clean, answer to that simple question, will Holtec, and I'm including all the way up to Holtec International, pay all of the costs to complete decommissioning up through and including the ISFI? I'd love to hear the answer. And hopefully you can bring that back to us.
I mean, personally, I don't have a crystal ball. We would not have foreseen 10 years ago that we were going to end up with a 6-year delay in the inability to be able to discharge water that had been discharged almost every year in the 40-year operation of the plant. I don't know what regulations, what changes may come downstream.
Do you expect regulation changes that would reduce your profit to zero?
I didn't expect this one, so I don't know what to expect
Does this
in the future.
approach reducing your profit significantly?
Mr. Lampert? I don't think Mr. Noyes can address that, but I have a question that.
Well, I'd like him to respond, and of course I'll take your.
He can't address that.
Well, then let him tell me that.
He already did.
That he can't address.
How many times does he have to address it?
Once.
He did.
Okay, and what is your comment?
My comment is that the incessant focus on an amount of water that unfortunately the regulators, listening to the voice of the people who don't understand a lot of what's going on in terms of damage to the environment, is...
Please, let her continue. You'll have a public comment.
You want to
period
get on
later.
the panel? Go for it. My problem is climate change, and I think that the delay is going to create a big, monstrous problem for all of us that we will not be able to climb out of if we continue to focus on the wrong thing. And the wrong thing to me is trying to create the monster. It's on, yeah. The wrong focus to me is trying to create the enemy out of Holtec, who isn't the enemy. The problem we have is collectively to address a decommissioning of an energy facility that everyone here and all of our offspring have benefited from. That's the issue we're trying to address. We're not trying to address who's making money and who's losing money. We're trying to be sure that the problem can be addressed. And there is a problem here. And it is waste, and it is dangerous, and it is environmentally difficult. It is also managerially difficult. And if we would help the company rather than hinder the company, then I think we would manage to do it before sea level rise sweeps it all out to sea and nobody gets what they want. That's my problem, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Gottlieb?
Are you in a position to state that throughout the whatever remaining closure period that there's no other technology or approach that's under consideration that would further enhance evaporation, like addition of bubblers to compensate for the loss of surface area? Are you going to do anything that will increase the rate of evaporation beyond what you're already doing?
We don't have anything planned that I'm aware of.
Any other questions for Mr. Noyes?
I have a question. So the cost of the appeal, does that come from the decommissioning fund?
Yes.
So, no, I'm just thinking the cost, so there's a technology available to remove the water from the site, which Holtec has chosen not to use. That's to truck it out or rail car it out, as Vermont has done. I don't see how the cost to do that, I think you're going to spend more money on appeal, taking money out of the decommissioning trust fund to pay for legal fees, to fight something that the state's already determined it's a done deal. Wouldn't it be more cost-effective to move that material off-site rather than spending that decommissioning trust fund money on an appeal and a long legal battle?
We don't think it's environmentally responsible.
So the other stations that have done that have been environmentally irresponsible.
Well, there's a big difference between VY and their ability to be able to, with a rail spur on site, and a very specific deal that they have with their waste repository for being able to take the material. They've made a decision, and it's based on their set of circumstances. We have to make one based on ours.
So all of the material, cut-up parts, components, resins, high radioactive material, how is that being removed from the site?
It's being shipped. You know it's being shipped.
I know it's being shipped.
Right.
So what's the difference with low-level
There
water?
isn't an alternative for that other material.
Yes, there is.
It just does not make, it just doesn't make good financial business sense to spend money from the decommissioning trust fund, delay decommissioning the plant 6 more years on top of that, than to say, okay, we had a decision from the state of Massachusetts that said you can't put that water into the bay. It makes bad economic sense. I mean, do the panel members, does it make sense to you? Am I reading this wrong?
I'd be happy to address that.
No, it makes absolutely no sense. And clearly, what you aren't factoring in was brought up at the last meeting. You also have to consider that inflation, also, the longer you delay this, the more inflation is likely to increase and make everything you do more expensive in
talking
8 years than in 6 years.
You're talking about
And-
construction costs in
Yeah.
2032 versus
Yeah,
continuing,
exactly.
get back on track, do the work. You're going to spend way more money delaying
No.
getting that material out.
That's exactly what I meant. And then Holtec wanted to have an interim spent fuel site in New Mexico, and somehow it was environmentally responsible to send the fuel, spent fuel from around the country to New Mexico, but it's not for the water. You see, the argument makes no sense.
I don't think our argument makes sense, honestly. I don't think that.
So Pine.
Yes.
Your concern is climate change, right? And you're concerned about water levels, seawater levels. Doesn't it make more sense?
Not only that.
But that's a large part of it, right?
Well, it's the time. It's the timing.
It's the time.
I mean, I
Wouldn't
think
you prefer
that
that they accept the state's decision, move the water off-site now, recommence decommissioning, and shrink that timeline, so it's less likely to be impacted by climate change?
I honestly think that we would. I honestly think that we will escalate climate change by shipping it off-site in a trucks like you're talking about. It takes several hundred trucks to move that kind of water across country. If Massachusetts were the smart state that we claim to be, we would put a clay pit in the ground near there and dump the damn water in that, and it would be a done deal. And it would be done in probably 6 months. But we can't do that. Why? Because it's against the law. Just like it's against the law to interpret this legal thing of Section 16, activities, uses, and facilities associated with the generation, transmission, and distribution of electric power, to exclude decommissioning from that. Don't interrupt me, Mr. Chair.
I'm listening carefully.
Oh, you're about to eat your microphone.
No, I lean forward so that when I decide I need a bite, it's available.
I'm trying to say that the state of Massachusetts is inconsistent in the way that it deals with things. For us to allow the town of Plymouth, let's say, to discharge 1.7 million gallons every single day into Plymouth Harbor that comes from Beth Israel and the industrial sites and everybody's septic systems, and not allow this final disposition when the testing has been done to show that it is below the regulatory standards, is the thing that's the problem for this company. That is what's keeping us from moving forward. Their whole decommissioning trust fund thing is a business thing. You know that. Everybody in this room knows that. They can't do business without having the finances to pay everybody. That's just the name of the game.
I don't-
But that's on us. Yes, we put the money aside, but we stopped putting the money aside at some point because we decided there was enough money there. That was a state decision too.
I don't disagree. I don't
All right,
disagree with
good,
you.
good.
My point is.
I like to agree with you, Mr. Priest.
My point is, you know, we're going to get to a point, if the appeal loses, we're going to be just further down the line, having spent more money out of the decommissioning trust fund than it would have cost to move the material off-site now.
Except for climate change, except for the fossil fuels it takes to drive 3,000 miles to satisfy the perception that this is a problem. And that's what it is. It's a perception that this is a problem.
Let's leave all the ways here
Agree to disagree.
in Kingston.
I need to, because of your position, I need to make sure that I understand this. You agree to disagree because you think there's a health hazard associated with the discharge of that water?
I did not say that.
Okay.
What I said was it doesn't make financial sense to me to spend
Okay.
decommissioning money on an appeal when it could be used to move that material off-site tomorrow.
And may I add that the point is, the law, the Ocean Sanctuary Act, is on the books. It's happened. If you didn't like it, then you should have gone to the legislature and tried to change it. But you didn't, those who were objecting and whining now. Therefore,
That's you.
it's happened. DEP made their decision. So it's done. Period.
What was done was a court decision in 1968 that allowed Pilgrim to be developed despite the fact that the state didn't want it to. So they're going back to court again. You cannot divorce a requirement to decommission a generating station from the generation. You have to clean up your mess. Everybody, every kid knows that. You got to clean up your room. Mom says so. Mother Earth needs us to clean up the site. We need to do that. Let's do it. Let's get it done together instead of pretending they're the enemy, because they're not. They didn't get the power we did.
Goes nowhere.
Say, Jack, Kelly.
Can we
So I have a
move
question
on?
for you. Is
Joe?
you're promoting the transfer of all that water wherever it goes. I think Vermont went to Idaho. Is that correct?
No.
What process is required to store that material for however long it takes for that to, what your concern is as far as the radionuclide to decay enough where it can be safe enough to get rid of it? Are they gonna have to contain it somehow? You're gonna have to ship it across country? Hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of contaminated water that you're saying we have a problem with? The risk of it being somehow mitigated, and how do you avoid the risk of having a hazard going to it? Or maybe we should just find a place here in Massachusetts to be able to store it permanently off-site if that's concern you have. Have you looked into that? What is the total cost of moving all this compared to what the other options we have here?
Who are you directed to? As far as storing on site?
Jack Priest,
the way-
I'm talking to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm
I
sorry.
don't make the decision on where they're going to store it. So we heard $20 million, right? That was the number we heard to dispose of $1.1 million, 1.1 million gallons. It's a number less than that now. What's a tanker truck go out? 50,000 gallons?
A tanker truck on the road?
Yeah.
Less than 4,000.
No.
Yes.
A gas truck is less than
Yes, that-
Yes.
Yes,
The-
and not
Yes,
only that,
we
they
deal-
The
have
baffles that are
accidents.
required for radiological transport, 4,000 gallons or
Okay.
less.
Got to do math in my, you got to make me do math in my head. So 4,000 gallons times 25 trucks to do 100,000 gallons? Times 8. That's not hundreds of trucks.
Where
I'd
does
like
it
to
go
see,
and how do
I'd
they
like to see
store
a
it?
breakdown of
My
what
question.
Holtec's cost would be. What Holtec's cost would be to ship that water off-site.
What is the cost to maintain it in storage once it gets there? Who would cover that cost?
Store it where?
It wouldn't be stored.
Wherever
Kelly.
you want to put it. Where do you want to put it?
It would be buried in clay in Texas at 3 times
In
the
Texas.
volume that it's sent at.
We got plenty of clay here, by the way.
I'm asking the money standpoint. The state has said you can't put it out into the bay. Okay, so how are we going to get rid of it?
Well, that is the question we need to, that I thought this
That's why I
panel was
wanted to
trying
know what the money was,
push.
right? What's it going to cost to ship it? What's it going to cost to do a legal appeal and a protracted legal argument to try to fight a decision that was already made, that the people in the community don't want? The people in the
Right, well then-
state don't want it put out into the bay. That's pretty clear.
Yeah. And I think then these are the 2 things we should be looking into as part of this panel. What are the options? What is it going to cost? What is the best way going forward and how to deal with this problem?
Well,
So that they can finish this decommissioning in a rapid way that we first intended to do it, right? Within 10 years from the time that we shut down to where they promised to decommission within 10. So we don't delay the process.
Right now, we're delayed 6 years. How long do you think a
Yes.
protracted legal battle is going to add to that?
Yeah.
no one has considered a legal battle over evaporation, Chapter 2.
You're in chapter
So
1.
I guess,
Chapter 2, chapter 1 is dumping into the bay, chapter 2 is evaporation.
Chairperson, what, I guess I'd put a motion, I'd like to see some data on the costs of disposal via shipping it off-site.
Are you-
A real
Include
number,
climate
not a
change. Can we-
ballpark, off the top of my head, I think it's gonna cost $20 million. So
gonna
we
cost-
can't, we
You do or
can't do
don't.
decision-making in this group and make recommendations to, the governor, which we're supposed to do annually, if we don't have the facts.
Okay, how do you, just in terms of the motion, I would love to have that information and run those calculations. How do you, whom do you suggest do that?
I would ask Holtec to come back
Fine.
and show us how they made that financial decision, that it was not financially economical to dispose of that water.
We did it in the alternatives evaluation that was submitted as part of the amendment. So it's on record with the Mass DEP and EPA as part of the permit amendment. The alternatives evaluation, the pros and cons of each of the alternatives were identified.
Does it
What
include
was the
costs?
date of-
It
of-
does.
what
Would
was
you
the-
send us that?
It's on the DEP's website or the EPA's website.
Was it in the application?
Yes.
Okay, so,
What was-
I don't review that, it got reviewed in Boston, but we can look at it. I'm not familiar with what the numbers were, but.
Yeah, and I
we
think
can
the
come up
obvious
with-
thing to keep in mind when you review it, Seth, is depending on when all of this was put together, the volume we're talking about keeps decreasing.
Seth, to be sure that we all have it, can you send it to us when you find it?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yep. The decision's online. Is it in the decision or is it in the application?
I'll send it to the chairman and he can forward it as he sees fit.
I will forward it to all members of the panel, and frankly, As far as my understanding is this is a public document, am I right, Seth?
It is.
Yeah, if it was submitted.
Then it basically, one way or another, it will be, should be available, be made available to the public.
So I think
All we have to
that,
do is get
so,
Tori and you're on this.
let me just add one more comment to that.
Surely.
All right. So the reason I ask for that is I want us, the panel, to move on. What's going to happen at the plant 6 months from now, a year from now? And get off of worrying about what's going to happen 12 years from now.
Understood.
There's a lot of us on the panel, we might not be here in 12 years.
I don't
right?
expect to be.
But we're going to be here the next 6 months, the next 12 months. What's the next thing that we need to focus on to ensure, you know, we're working through this decommissioning and we're making sure things are characterized correctly, that we're not impacting the public.
I have utterly no objection to that. I wholeheartedly support it.
Oh, so do you want to make a motion or not? Are you going to?
Or just a request of hold. Do you need a motion or a request to hold?
I don't think I need a motion, so
Okay.
we're going to get that information from Dave to the chair. The chair will share it with us. If we have questions, the next meeting, we can talk about, review that and talk about
Yep.
the finance part of the shipping of water. Good?
Sounds good to me. Anything else for Mr. Noyes? Mr. Pickering?
Mr. Chairman, so the first thing I'd like to do, if possible, Mr. Lampert, is just identify item number 5 on the agenda. We're going to be taking a pass on that tonight.
I will not be taking a complete pass on it. I think it's worth a little introductory discussion because it's quite clear to me that actually from about half of our discussion over the last 40 minutes has been directed to, well, let me back up a second. What is item 5 on the agenda? Because I gather a lot of people out here who don't know.
Yep, ESA work plan, settlement agreement, site restoration, environmental requirements, the questions that you sent to the department and the AG's office and to DPH. I'm not prepared tonight to answer those questions.
Yeah. What item 5, let me just back up a second, is directed to is my hope and view that we all need to understand exactly what has been done and will be done in the course of decommissioning to ensure that at the tail end of it, we have a site that really, by anybody's standard, I don't care if it's the state's, yours, mine, or the NRC's, can be used for anything, an effectively clean site. There is a section in the settlement agreement that is entitled basically the environmental section. It has in it a lot of specific requirements that need to be made. We have had a series of environmental site plans submitted. I think we're up to at least 4 now, trying to reach an agreement between Holtec and the state as to what they are going to do, physically what going to do, to basically clean this site up. What I had hoped to get going was a discussion not on what do the words of anything mean, et cetera, but let's get down to the ground and understand precisely what is being done. And if we get that far, we've made massive progress. We then basically can hope, and I'm sure the state can help us out on this, ensure that what is being done is at least what the settlement agreement thinks should be done. The settlement agreement defines the Pilgrim site very, very broadly. It's defined far more broadly than simply this area that the reactor itself is on the water side of Rocky Hill Road. The word site is used throughout, I don't want to get into an argument as to what site means in paragraph B versus paragraph ZZ, but I think we do need to understand what is being done to clean up the entire site. I think we need to understand what is being done to basically clean, as Mr. Noyes referred to, as the foundations of structures.
Mr. Chairman, a point of order. I'm just a little confused about where we are in the agenda because I thought Seth was going to give his report.
Why don't, let me get back to it, but basically, we'll my short answer to Seth's question is, we'll probably get very briefly into it, but I understand that the state is not prepared to answer any questions and that Holtec is not prepared to answer any questions. The questions that I sent out 2 to 3 weeks ago and the...
Well, it was a little,
Last
like about
Wednesday.
10 days ago.
Okay, fine, whatever it was, yes.
Right,
Mr.
but
Canny.
only one work week.
If no one is prepared to answer questions, what exactly are we going to get into?
I would, all I am going to get into, can we wait till we get to that one? Let's get Seth.
We can, but I mean, we're gonna answer your questions, Jim. It's just not gonna be tonight.
Yeah. Seth, let me ask a question of you, and actually then, since we seem to be there, and ask the same question of Dave. Are the state and Holtec prepared to come to the next meeting, which is, I believe, in September 21st or 22nd, I forget the exact date, to discuss what is being done, what the settlement agreement says, what the ESAs say, to answer questions and participate in the discussion? Not simply a presentation on a report, but really get down to a discussion so we can all understand what is going on and what will be going on. Is the state prepared to do that? Is Holtec prepared to do that?
We are.
So I'm here, just like I am at every meeting. Jack is here. The other part of that, I can't answer for the Attorney General's office, which is the other state entity that I believe you've asked to attend. So I can't speak for them.
And I guess, obviously, the question, and you're about to get into it, is we've got to be able to get beyond the approved report. That doesn't do it.
I'm sorry?
We have to be able to get beyond the report that you regularly give that has been approved, because there are going to be follow-ups and there are going to be questions that just need full discussion. What I'm looking for is a full discussion of the subject by the people who actually know what's involved and what's going on. And the state is critical to having that discussion.
No argument here.
Right?
But I cannot commit to the AG's office.
Could you?
Jack, you good?
You and I are aligned.
Yeah, as long as you, frankly, if you two are here and are free to discuss, that would probably do a very good job.
On the site cleanup stuff, I'll have John Handrahan will be with me, because that's his area of expertise, so.
Those are the people we want, the people who have the areas of expertise and know what's going on.
Yep.
I don't want a lot of legal argument.
Okay, so are we ready for agenda item number 4?
We are.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have an administrative update. Is Mr. Wade still with us online? Mr.
No.
Gregory Wade is the new
Wait, coming back?
Yep.
I am. I'm here.
Yeah, I've been asked to make sure everybody knows that you're a new designee for the DPU on handicap. So do we have that right?
That is right. I'm filling into the role formerly held by John Slocum very ably, and look forward to working with all of you and attending in person and during the future meetings.
Okay. So the next update I have is on the water discharge, on the permit modification application, as we've been discussing. So Mass DEP has completed its review of Holtec's application for a discharge permit modification and has issued a final determination to deny that request. Cape Cod Bay is a protected ocean sanctuary under the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. The Act prohibits the dumping or discharge of commercial, municipal, domestic, or industrial waste into ocean sanctuaries or issuing a permit to allow it, with certain exceptions that do not apply to the Holtec discharge. Holtec's permit modification application seeks authorization to discharge wastewater that qualifies as industrial wastewater into Cape Cod Bay, and therefore discharge is prohibited by the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. As part of an extensive review of the Holtec permit modification request, Mass DEP held a public comment period, held a public hearing, and received more than 1,000 comments. The Healy-Driscoll administration will continue to monitor Holtec's role in the decommissioning of the Pilgrim facility to ensure that the work meets state standards to protect the environment and public health. So that's what I have on the discharge permit modification.
May I ask one question? The discharge permit, I believe, says, or something I've read today says, that you will, and I assume that's somewhere in DEP, probably with the help of the AG, respond to all the comments sometime. Do you have any idea when that's likely to happen?
I don't know exactly, but there will be response to comments, Jim.
And hopefully it won't take another year.
Give me 2 seconds to look at what I got here. Yeah, I don't have a date for you. You know, it says, I've got Mass DEP is currently developing response to comments. The final determination was issued in advance of the response to comments due to the public interest in the timely issuance of the final decision.
If you could get us some sense of when that might happen, it would be appreciated.
I'll do the best I can.
Thank you.
Water evaporation update. Mass DEP has also reviewed Holtec's potential to emit air contaminants from evaporation of water at the facility and determined that such evaporation activity does not require an air quality permit. The total potential to emit for regulated pollutants is less than 30 pounds in total. The threshold that requires air permitting is 2,000 pounds or 1 ton. Mass DEP has stressed to Holtec that if it intends to change current operations in a manner that would increase air emissions, it must notify Mass DEP to ensure compliance with all applicable state laws and regulations. Holtec has conducted updated sampling this past Tuesday, July 16th, with Mass DEP and Department of Public Health representatives present, and will provide sampling results to the state. Mass DEP does not anticipate the sampling done recently will materially change the potential to emit calculations from that process. Any questions on that?
There will, is that the end of your report?
On that item?
Yeah, I have a question. When can we expect to see the results?
That's a question for Holtec, if they can answer it.
I expect that we'll have the results within 3 weeks.
And you will send it to the chair, so we all will have it?
We'll send it to DEP, and then we can share it the way we did the split sampling last time.
Only there wasn't split sampling, was there?
Not this time.
Not this time.
Yeah,
No.
okay.
Yep. Seth, I do have a question on this, and it's a fairly basic one. As I read the various letters that have gone back and forth on this, they often use the word pollutant, and they list a lot of chemical pollutants. They do not list any radioactive materials. The U.S. Clean Air Act says that air pollutant includes radioactivity. The definition of air contaminant in 310 CMR means any substance, including but not limited to radioactive material. It leads me to, I guess, 2 questions. I fail to see how, in deciding whether there has been a release of an air pollutant or a contaminant, you can properly not take into account all of the radioactive water that is included in the emissions, in the evaporant.
Okay, did you have a chance to read the document that we sent to Holtec?
I have read it. I have read it, and it quite clearly avoids all discussion of radioactive materials and
There's a
contaminants.
footnote in there that says these calculations do not include potential emissions of radionuclides for the evaporation of water, which is regulated by the NRC standards.
I see that, but I
I'm not
also.
done.
Excuse
I'm not
me.
done. In 2023, radioactive particulate and tritium releases to the air from Pilgrim Station were well below NRC standards as published in the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station 2023 Annual Radiological Environmental Operating Report that was submitted to the NRC.
Is there
And
any
so-
state, excuse me, I thought you were finished.
So that's the answer, Jim.
No, actually, it isn't quite the answer, because is there a single state regulation or written policy that tells you that when you are looking at air emissions, you do not, as the U.S. Clean Air Act says, include radioactive materials, and you do not, as your own regulations say, include radioactive materials? That's my basic. Frankly,
So
it
I'll
does
talk-
not strike me that the mere fact that the NRC regulates answers the question, because had you taken, having made the decision that you did, that the Ocean Sanctuaries Act prohibits dumping this stuff, it seems very clear, although you never say it in your decision, that the decision was made that the fact that the NRC regulates radioactive did not forbid you from prohibiting the liquid discharge. And I'm asking why that situation isn't the same for radioactive materials that, as defined by the Clean Air Act, are air pollutants, and as defined by your regulations, are air contaminants.
I lost what's the question that you want me to answer?
The question, quite simply, is the Clean Air Act says air pollutants include radioactive material. Your regulations say, the air pollutants do. Your regulations say that air contaminants include radioactive materials.
Radionuclides.
Clean Air Act is the EPA, correct?
It can be. It can be.
It says the CMR says radioactive material.
The Clean Air Act is the EPA, correct?
Yeah,
I know.
yeah, no, I don't, yeah, that's fine. No, we take our, we assume, we assume the authority through our programs. But so your question is whether or not
My question is
DEP
there
regulates
any
it?
written Massachusetts policy or regulation that says when DEP conducts a review of the type you conducted for Holtec, that you do not consider radioactive materials, despite the fact that both the Clean Air Act definition of air pollutants that the state follows because it uses this Clean Water Act,
Okay, well,
and
so-
the regs include as air contaminants.
Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. How about you tee up your question for me and send it to me in an email?
Will do.
And we'll get you an answer on that.
Great, thank you. Because I think that's
Yeah, I
a
mean, I'm
critical
not- I'm
question
not-
on all this.
Yep. You know, the Clean Air Act, the standards that exist for radionuclides are derived from dose limitations from NRC, not from us. They're, just hang on for a second.
I am.
Right? If you go to the Mass DEP air pollution regs and the National Ambient Air Quality Standards that we enforce, they're not any standards. There are no concentrations that we would check what you're asking about against.
Well, I guess the question, if you
But
really
there are
want
there are NRC dose
Yeah, but
limits.
if you really want to be simplistic on the question, what is the weight of the radioactive water that's evaporated? Because you do have a ton regulation.
Well, I can tell you what the calculation has been for the mass of the tritium that's in that water.
That isn't what I asked. I asked for the radioactive water.
Well, the tritium would be the radionuclide, wouldn't it, not the water?
The radioactive, we could argue about it, and there's no sense in doing that here, but I will get you the question.
Okay.
Because, quite frankly, you have said several times that DEP doesn't look at radioactive materials. I find that seriously troubling.
Okay, well,
And it's clearly
that's
way
your
above the pay
opinion.
grade.
It's not in our regulations that there are any standards that would need to be met in terms of ambient air for radionuclides.
No, the only standard that I see in your regulation is frankly the ton a year.
That's the permitting threshold.
Yep.
That is correct.
And I guess that is the only thing that you now
That's our-
have. So
that's
my
our-
question is
Yep.
directed, at the moment, within that regulation, what counts as the ton? And we can deal at a higher level. I believe the Attorney General is the place who would have to answer the question, is why do not the Ocean Sanctuary Act, which does not differentiate between radionuclides and non-radionuclides, or, for example, the Endangered Species Act, which also does not cover equally well emitted evaporative water as well as liquid water coming out of one of the outfalls. And that, again, is well above your pay.
Okay, if that's your question, put it in an email. I'll do my best to get you an answer. Okay, are we good on that one?
Yeah.
Okay,
Anybody
to go back to item 5 in the ESA. So the Attorney General's office is still working to finalize the state's response to a Holtec site assessment work plan. Response actions under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, the MCP or Chapter 21E, are ongoing. The Phase 2 comprehensive site assessment, which documents the nature and extent of contamination and contains a risk characterization, is due to be submitted to Mass DEP by April 21st of 2025. Other cleanup issues. DEP's asbestos section continues to be actively engaged in overseeing the demolition activity that is ongoing at the site and is meeting regularly with the company to manage the asbestos discovery and identification, abatement and removal processes. The other item that's been out there for a little bit is Mass DEP is continuing to evaluate Holtec's request to change its wastewater disposal system to a Title V system. And there are some issues that the plant has run into, I believe, with soil at the site. Dave?
Yeah, that's correct. The ability to have to site it in a location where the soil will accept the discharge.
Public Safety, MEMA, continues to work with local partners on public safety planning and will schedule additional trainings as appropriate. So that's what I have for prepared remarks.
Any questions?
All set?
I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That brings us to item 5 that we obviously have skirted around here. I hope, I'm very glad to hear that Holtec has said it will participate in September meeting with that discussion. And I hope that Mr. Pickering and Mr. Priest, and hopefully some people, if you need anybody else, for heaven's sake, feel free to bring them with you, will be able to talk about, frankly, a detailed discussion about how are we cleaning this place up, what are we requiring to be done, what's not going to be done. For panel members, I would ask that everybody read it, and actually everybody in the public has access to it. Read the attachment to the agenda, because it raises a lot of the subjects that, at least in my going through it, seem to be ones that bear on the question of, what are we doing there? What has to be done? If you have any thoughts on those or any additions, get them in. I will circulate the questions that I have sent to Mr. Noyes and to the state, so you can see those too. And if you have any others, get those in. I think this may well be a discussion that takes a significant part of our next meeting, and I hope people will agree with me that it's an important discussion that we need to have.
Then I would suggest that we take this item 5, move it to the next meeting's agenda. And I know that the comments that you sent, or the questions that you sent, are yours, but I'm sure other panel members have questions too.
That is why I would want to send mine, and I want everybody's input on what their questions are.
With that being said, Seth and Dave, what kind of timeline or deadline do you want all these questions to you, so you're afforded to be able to answer them in the September meeting?
Good question.
Because this is too short a notice, not you, but the questions are too short a notice for those of us that want to take a look and have our questions. So I want to make sure that we give you guys ample opportunity to be able to respond to these questions.
I would just request that questions that have to do with the interpretation of the state agreement, that those ones are going to require a legal review, at least on my end, so I'd request that you get those in as early as you can.
Okay.
But I don't have any specific deadline on when we won't be able to answer a question.
Okay, Seth, how about you?
It'd be great if we could get all the questions in like 4 weeks, within the next 4 weeks. That gives us almost a month to get
That's-
ready for the next meeting.
That's kind of what I
And I cannot speak for the Attorney General's office.
Right. Nope, so it's clear to the panel that if you have additional questions, we need to get them to Seth or Dave, copy them, so that they have the opportunity to respond to these questions. Is that clear for the panel, everybody?
Set 2 weeks, because we have to bring that to the IWG and have our senior review before we bring them back to the meeting.
It's not an easy path for us to get
I know,
Those were
that's why
stuff
I was
released.
asking.
It was a long list, and those were complicated
Yeah.
questions.
Yep.
So,
and that's fair, because it has to be vetted.
Yep. And that's why I'm asking for deadlines, just so that you guys we don't do you guys a disservice.
oh, you have more than that?
So, Mr. Chairman,
You have more than that list?
I just, there's 20 questions in there, right? And at least maybe 21, and some with sub-questions, or 21 categories.
They're categories, they're intentionally not,
Yeah.
they're intentionally not questions in the agenda.
Right, so there's questions in the categories. It might even make sense to split that up over 2 meetings and not have an expectation that that we're gonna be able to get through in a period of
Agreed.
time that we set for the agenda. And that would also give Holtec and the state the ability to prioritize maybe, which questions they think they can answer relatively quickly versus which ones might take longer.
Yeah,
We wanna
and
give
I will
more
take
time.
anybody's suggestion on a rational split of subjects matter.
Well,
Okay. Yeah,
resubmit-
I'll split right down the middle right now and just do the first half and then the second half, but.
And you're looking at the listing that's in the agenda, because I think there's 6
Right.
items in there.
Right,
A, B, C,
and that's
D,
just-
E, F, G.
Yeah, I mean, you had categories of F, and then you had numbers, like A through F, and 1 through 21, and then sub-questions in there, so I would do A, B, and C at the next meeting.
Again, keep in mind that those are just Mr. Lambert's questions.
Right.
So there are maybe other questions
So
that.
those
want-
categories, A, B, and C, and then whatever other questions
And they could be different
emerge.
categories, so.
If I've missed a category, let's get it.
You just got to break it up a little. It's not realistic to think that, we're already an hour over agenda, we got public comment still, I'm worried that we're losing track of
Understood.
our ability to
Jim,
run.
did you set up your categories in accordance with what's in the settlement?
Excuse me, I missed the last part.
Yeah, are the nature of your questions, the way they're headed, do they follow the settlement?
No,
They don't, okay.
they try to follow, because things go back and forth.
Yep,
like-
okay,
like
no, I was
what's
just
the
curious.
site, what's a,
Yep, so it's not the environmental section of the settlement?
well, I think it's nearly all in the environmental section of the
Understood.
settlement.
Yep.
But it's spread all over the ESAs and
Okay.
the settlement itself.
Okay.
Just the way things ended up being created before me. Okay?
Good?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We talked about 6, we resolved that.
Yeah, no motion tonight. Okay. Let's skip 6. Status of the decision on their request. We, I think, have talked about that. I expect, and I think everybody does expect, that there may well be an appeal, and if anybody wants at any later time to talk about what that appeal might be about, we'll free, but let's not take more time on that issue tonight.
Do you want to move that to September's meeting also?
Sure.
Okay, good.
Excuse me? Public comment. How many people want to speak? 1, 2. Let's get a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do I have 8? Anybody online want to speak?
There is one person, Joanne Geary has her hand up.
Excuse me, is that a new hand over here? 3 minutes, okay. average of 3 minutes apiece.
Who's Tommy?
Where'd mine go? Here it is.
Okay. Hi, Diane Turco with Cape Town Winters. I have a quick question for Mr. Noyes. Is Holtec planning to turn the heaters back on?
We are planning to turn the heaters back on when we process BC waste
Okay.
and for
I
the
just said-
winter.
Thank you. And then I have a question for DEP. Seth, DEP determined that Holtec was going to release industrial wastewater into Cape Cod Bay and denied the permit because it's industrial wastewater? Is that true?
I'm sorry, say again?
You determined that Holtec can't dump because it's industrial wastewater?
That is correct.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Oh, good, okay. Okay, let's see. I'm going to read a quote. Evaporation releases higher levels of radioactive materials due to the concentration and lack of dilution when water becomes a gas. That's not DEP, that's not DPH, that's Holtec spokesperson John Del Mar after Holtec dumped radioactive water in Barnegat Bay at Oyster in New Jersey. So I have two requests of the panel. We asked, the Cape Town Winters has been asking Commissioner Heupel for a meeting since January, February, March. We sent letters asking for a meeting. We got a response from Senator Moran's office because we had to go through her, and they said, come to the NDCAP meeting. So here we are to make our requests. Our number
Did
one
anybody
request.
happen to say why to come to handicap?
No, nope, nope. Okay, so since the DEP denied Holtec the permit because of liquid materials, the Ocean Sanctuaries Act also includes gaseous materials. The act defines waste to include, quote, any unwanted, discarded, or environmentally harmful solid, liquid, or gaseous materials resulting from commercial, municipal, domestic, or industrial activities. It seems that the gaseous materials would be in the same category as the liquid materials. So we are asking you to follow your mandate and advise Governor Maura Healey to enforce the Ocean Sanctuaries Act to prohibit Holtec from polluting our environment via evaporating the industrial wastewater that becomes carcinogenic materials contaminating our communities in Cape Cod Bay, and we're asking for a formal written response to that request. We have another request to initiate an independent investigation into the whistleblower letter allegations that appear to put the worker and public health and safety in immediate jeopardy, okay? The NDCAP has a responsibility to the people they serve. This includes the workers at Holtec Pilgrim, who, according to the whistleblower letters, are working in a dangerous, contaminated, and hostile work environment. Now, with 3 whistleblower letters received by Cape Town Winters and Mass DPH, raising many serious concerns about ongoing worker and public health and safety, we are asking the NDCAP panel to follow your mandate at our request to advise Governor Maura Healey to initiate an independent investigation into the allegations cited in the whistleblower letters. So I'm going to submit these to you, and I would like them to go on the public record.
Please send them electronically.
I will do that too, but I'm going to hand you a paper copy too, Jim, okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Hi, once again back, actual Plymouth Town native. I know a lot of you guys don't actually live here, so I still stand by the fact that you guys shouldn't be talking on behalf of people who do live here. Local lobsterman, used to spend time in the Navy. I'm used to seeing stuff get dumped. I don't see how we're talking about shipping it out when it would have been faster to get it evaporated or discharged. It's been...
Could I get your name again, please?
My name?
Yeah.
It's going to be Andrew Jackson. Yeah. Same as last time.
Sorry.
So, and then as the local Plymouth person that's dealt with you guys for the last several decades on and off, make sure you guys don't leave your trash out in front again. I know that you guys like to leave signs out there. And it's always disappointing to have people who don't belong in this town come in and trash it. So, be really good if you guys didn't do that this time again.
Barry?
Yes, good evening. I'm Dr. Barry Potvin, currently the chair of the Plymouth Board of Health.
also the chair of a public health shared services grant that involves 6 different communities, including Duxbury, Kingston, and Wareham, and Carver, and Plimpton. So I had a whole lot of questions, but obviously I can't do that in 3 minutes. I gave up my time last time in the hopes that we could get this meeting finished before 10 o'clock at night, which didn't happen. Just a couple of really quick questions. I need information, basically. I wonder if Holtec could give me some estimate of what it costs to ship one truck with 4,000 gallons of water to the disposal site.
Okay.
I don't have that figure in front of me, but I can provide it to you,
Okay.
what our estimate would be.
Because last time, 2 times ago, I think I asked if the cost was estimated at $20 million. That obviously was adequate to ship all the water that existed at the time of that estimate, I would imagine, correct?
I don't know. I haven't seen that figure.
It's in a letter from Dr. Singh to Senator Markey.
So I assume that now that there's considerably less water, the cost would be lower because there would be less trucks needed. In terms of climate concerns, obviously I'm a public health official here in town, so my concerns are focused on protecting the public health of the people of Plymouth and our surrounding towns. I understand people are focused on climate. There's a lot of people focused on fiscal sort of questions and concerns. There's other people that are focused on things that involve reuse of the property once it's finally released for development. But I have to look into what is the safest way to dispose of the radioactive material that least impacts the public health of the people of Plymouth and surrounding towns. I must agree with Jack. His concerns were just reasonably focused on financial issues, but it happens that shipping the water out to a disposal facility in Texas is also certainly going to be the safest way to get the material removed and disposed of at the least risk to the public health of the people here in Plymouth. We're concerned about it simply because we know that Plymouth does have higher than average cancer rates. We don't want to see them go any higher than they already are. We're trying to find out from the DPH something more about the cancer rates here in Plymouth beyond the 2015 data.
You're basically at time, Barry.
That was already published, but we can't get the more recent data. So I'll end there because I don't want to take too much time. As chair of the Board of Health, I know how tight things are.
Right, and would you send me your questions, please?
My name is Brian Campbell, retired electrical engineer, and I strongly support discharging treated water from Pilgrim Nuclear Station into Cape Cod Bay. Holtec is safely decommissioning Indian Point Nuclear in New York. Generation Atomic calculates that the water outside that plant, if one were to hypothetically consume it, they would need to drink approximately 80 gallons to equal the radiation dose received from eating a regular banana. This will be about the same for Pilgrim. The presentations by Holtec to this panel shows Holtec to be a good corporate citizen performing the Pilgrim decommissioning in a truthful and open manner that should be commended. Closing Pilgrim raised Massachusetts emissions just as in New York. As Guardian reports in the March article about Indian Point nuclear premature closing titled, "A Nuclear Plant's Closure Was Hailed as a Green Win, Then Emissions Went Up." Shuttering New York facility raises awkward climate crisis questions as gas, not renewable, fills the gap in power generation. Massachusetts has chosen to commit its taxpayer resources to build an unproven, resource-intensive grid to harness weather-derived electricity with storage to mitigate its unreliability. The corrupt Massachusetts political class is not concerned about emissions reductions, but rewarding green gifting political allies and pro-renewable anti-nuclear NGO allies like the Sierra Club, New England Aquarium, Environmental League of Massachusetts, Mass and Maine Audubon, Conservation Law Foundation. All are anti-nuclear. All have accepted money from the offshore wind industry and support it. The increased whale deaths, the fiberglass shards littering our beaches, don't walk barefoot, the paving over of valuable farmland and the cutting of mass forests for Uyghur slave-manufactured, genocided, imported Chinese solar panel industrial facilities because local siting control has been eliminated, all add up to an unaffordable, ugly, unlivable, nature-destroyed Massachusetts. Thank you.
Would you send us a copy of that electronically, please? Would you send us a copy of that electronically, please?
Of course.
Please.
I can with all the references to
Oh, no.
because I can back
No,
up everything
no,
else.
that's fine. I'm just trying to make sure I get everything that I'm supposed to put into the public record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Chris Nord. I'm an out-of-towner. I live in Amesbury, Massachusetts, and I'm here because what happens down here this year could happen near Seabrook years from now, maybe just a few years from now. So this is of interest to all of the citizens of the state of Massachusetts. The first thing I wanted to say is that I submitted questions 2 meetings ago in March. There were 4 questions. It took all 3 minutes for me to ask the questions. I didn't get the answers, and I think that they got read into the minutes, I understand, at the last meeting that I did not attend. And I'm hoping still to get the answers to those questions, but I'm not going to hold up the meeting in order to get those answers now. I'm just asking that they be entertained. I know that the chair has a copy of my questions. And I just wanted to offer a suggestion. If you're going to actually think about calculating the financial and environmental costs of shipping by truck all of the radioactive water, which I think is a really important calculation for this board to entertain, that it might be worthwhile to entertain the notion of shipping by truck to rail lines. And in that way, not have to send 1,000 trucks over the roadways all the way to the southwest, but do it by rail for most of the distance. And of course, there would have to be a hugely guarded and secure transfer of water from those trucks to the rail system, but it may result in a significant environmental and even economic savings. So I just wanted to make that suggestion. Thank you for your time.
I did some quick math. It's not 1,000 trucks. So 850,000 gallons, 4,000 gallons a truck, that's 212 trucks.
There you go. Okay. Thank you.
Chris, could you send me those questions again and also your statement for tonight? Yeah, please send them electronically. You have no idea what my piles look like.
Hi, Joanne Corrigan. I live at Priscilla Beach. I'm about 1/4 mile from the power plant, so I have a pretty big vested interest in what's going on over there. Oh, before I start, thank you, Pine, for trying to tell us what morons we are. This isn't Mississippi. Massachusetts has some of the most educated people in all of America. We're a highly educated state. So, you know, I personally am insulted by that comment of yours.
I apologize if that's the way you took it. I didn't say you were a moron.
Thank you. Anyway, my concern is 4 of the 113 sirens have been removed, and that all of them were going to be removed, which is what you said. Now, how do they notify the residents if there's ever a leak on one of those casts? Let's not forget, they're at almost sea level. Come down to Priscilla Beach during a nor'easter. The north end of the beach, the waves come up, they come up the steps, they come up to the sitting area, they keep going where the bikes and the baby carriages are, and keep going into the parking lot and end up in the street. at high tide during a nor'easter. So those cast, they're metal, and salt air and salt water rots metal. I know that for a fact. Whether it's a terrorist attack or it just leaks, it's my understanding there's no way to stop the leak other than entomb it in concrete like Chernobyl. Now, they took out if they're taking out all our emergency sirens, what are people supposed to do that want to evacuate, that have kids or are pregnant and want to get out of the way of this radioactive field? We can't smell it, we can't see it. You know, that's the advantage you have when you can release it and we don't know what you're doing over there. So my question is, what's the plan? Is there a plan?
The emergency plan was modified to identify the fact that in its current configuration, there is not a plausible scenario where sufficient radiation would be released such that an individual would have to evacuate, given EPA guidelines for an individual at the site boundary.
Is that what they told people?
That was why the NRC approved the revision to the emergency plan.
Is that what they told people at Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island?
No, it's not.
Oh. Well, anyway, and back to the plan, and I loved your plan. Let's not, bring common sense into this. The trucking cost, I thought they said was $21,000. But you're right. Why are they fighting this? It's black and white. You're not
Your
supposed to do it.
time's just about there.
Thank you.
And just one question. My understanding, and I've talked a lot to the Duxbury Fire Chief, is that the emergency planning people in each town have come up with what they need in whatever plan they possibly can do so. Maybe it would be a good idea to get a couple of those people in here, the Plymouth Fire Chief in particular, to answer the questions. Yes, there are some plans. Are they going to make you happy? I'll almost guarantee the answer is no, because both the question of notification and the real question of how evacuation might work are very difficult questions. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Sean Noyes. Members of the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel, appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. I'd like to discuss the matter of the tritium discharge, assuming that an appeal or some legal process and Holtec is able to discharge the water. I understand many of the concerns surrounding the issue, but I'd like to provide some additional context, science data, to clarify why the discharge is not harmful. First, it's important to recognize that tritium, a radioactive isotope of hydrogen, is relatively weak in terms of radioactive emissions. Its radiation is a very low energy beta particle, which is stopped simply by 2 inches of air. It does not penetrate the skin. It poses no risk to human health when diluted in water. Let's consider the recent example from Japan, where tritium-contaminated water from Fukushima power plant treated, discharged. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, the tritium concentration from the advanced liquid processing system is far below Japan's operational limit of 1,500 becquerels per liter. For perspective, an online monitoring as of March 6th of this year only detected 256 becquerels per liter. This is significantly below the Japanese regulatory limit of 60,000 becquerel liters for tritium discharge, and even far below World Health Organization drinking quality standards of 10,000. I believe the US is 700. IAEA's independent on-site analysis has consistently confirmed that the tritium concentrations in the water discharged from Fukushima are far below operational limits, with the first 3 batches totaling 23,400 cubic meters of water containing tritium concentrations, well within safe limits. These findings illustrate that even when dealing with a large volume of treated water, tritium levels can be managed effectively and ensure safety. Applying this understanding to Holtec's situation, we can infer that the tritium discharge can, into Cape Cod Bay, be well managed, adhere to similar or even stricter standards. Moreover, the dilution factor in a large body of water like Cape Cod Bay simply reduces the concentration of tritium, minimizing any potential impact on marine life or human health. In conclusion, the discharge of tritium into Cape Cod Bay by Holtec, if managed according to stringent standards, poses no real risk. The science and the data from international practices, such as those observed by Japan.
You're at time.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one question, and actually I should have raised it with Brian. If reading the Ocean Sanctuary Act and the decisions, there are really two subjects that are floating around, and they're kind of like ships passing in the night. The way the act is written, and I think the way DEP understands it, is it just flatly prohibits discharge of industrial waste. It does not look at or consider the question that you're raising, and there's been a lot of discussion here over the past couple of years, of, okay, what might the effect of that waste be? So I guess the question I would ask for both you and Brian is, have you considered talking to the legislature? Because as of the moment, DEP, and presumably its appeal board, and presumably a court going up beyond that, are going to have to work with the statute as written. And I may be wrong, but I personally don't think that the risk by the release has any relevance to what the statute says. So I think this is something that you're going to have to address legislatively, if that's the way to address it, because I don't see how, I just don't see how it works into the set of rules that we're now living with.
I also think if we applied the standards you articulated tonight, I would expect you down in Sagamore to talk about that natural gas plant.
If we basically...
Does it or does it not emit radon? Yes or no, sir?
The answer is I would assume it probably does, but I don't know that.
That's not the job of the panel.
And
he's asking me a generic question.
No,
I'm responding.
no, and I guess basically my problem there is that...
Mr. Chair, the current speaker is over the allotted time. Perhaps if we can
I'll talk to you afterward.
move to the
Happy
next
to.
speaker.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Hi, good evening. My name is Paul Quintal, and been a Plymouth resident here close to 70 years, and I've made my living taking passengers for ocean excursions, much of the time out on Cape Cod Bay for the last 50-plus years. I've come to really love Cape Cod Bay, and I want to protect it. Cape Cod Bay, you may not know, was known as an NDA, no discharge area. When I was a kid, raw sewage went out to the bay. You didn't have to shut your valves off. Currently, we've wised up to that. We shut valves, we put it in a holding tank, we discharge properly on shore. And I have an idea that I want the pool water at Holtec to go somewhere else. I'm going to offer a secondary idea that's not been discussed, and that would be to barge it out of here. We push petroleum products up and down the coast. We push caustic materials up and down the coast on double-walled barges, quite safely, I may add. And to add to the environmental impacts of blowing diesel fuel up and down the coast with trucking, you get one tugboat that takes maybe 250,000 gallons at a pop off of Pilgrim, ship it to a proper disposal area, maybe Texas or other places that you use. Has that idea been discussed at Holtec at all, or the concept of that idea?
No, I'm not aware whether that has been discussed or not.
Okay, maybe it's something that could be discussed and talked about, maybe at a much more reasonable cost than pushing 212 trucks up and down the coast to get it to a distant place. I'll just offer that as an idea. Also, you know, we're evaporating and stuff's going up in the air. And historically, when Pilgrim was in operation, they had anemometers. They had a tower on the southeast corner of the property that had two anemometers. One was at about 150-foot level, the other one was at a 30-foot level, which would monitor the wind direction, the wind speed, and the air temperature. Also, on the northwest side of the property, they had a sled that went up and down that had another monitor at about 100 feet. So in the event of a catastrophic event, you had an idea where stuff was going. I'm going to guess probably at this point, those two pieces of equipment, the tower and the sled, have probably been removed.
They have.
Okay, so does Holtec have any idea where the wind is going and when the temperature is and the monitoring the environmental concerns of what's going on right now?
Yeah, we use averages for calculation of release.
But on a day-to-day basis, you don't have no idea.
It would just be commercially available information.
Yeah. You know, another concern for me is the potential for
You're almost
a
at time.
devastating impact. You get 60-plus canisters down there. And something that goes through my head is we are in a crazy world. Just look what happened last
Unfortunately,
week.
We're at time.
I'm done?
Well, you're not done, but the clock ticks.
I'll finish it up. I'm concerned about some type of catastrophic, crazy, terroristic type attack on those canisters out there. It would devastate our areas, our communities. Do you have any plan for protect us?
I think the answer to that is, correct me, Dave, and I'm not sure as you can say, I know there are plans. I think a lot of that is in safety material that you frankly can't talk about.
Well, I mean, there are detailed security plans, both with the manning of the facility on site, but with taking advantage of government agencies and intelligence, the same as protection of the power plant when it operated, which was a significantly higher risk when it had all that fuel in a reactor vessel on site rather than being in hardened casks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you. Mr. Cronin.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Madam Vice Chair. Good evening to the members of the panel. My name is Ben Cronin. I live and grew up and reside in Duxbury. I am a member of the Town of Duxbury Nuclear Advisory Committee, but the views I express tonight are my own. Notwithstanding the points raised by a previous speaker, this is a state body, and therefore every inhabitant of the Commonwealth has standing to speak before this body. It's not a Town of Plymouth body. And if you're upset about that, your problems lie with the legislature, not with this body. I'd moreover point out, in response to the second Mr. Noyes, public comment Mr. Noyes, whose first name I don't recall, and I apologize. Fukushima is instructive because after the release of that water last summer, the Chinese government put a ban on all imports of seafood from Japan. And I think that's certainly relevant in an area with an approximately $1.7 billion fishing industry. I would note, in terms of my main points, Mr. Chair, which I'll try to be brief on, I know it is late, that this... You've
got 2 minutes.
Okay. I'll go quickly still. This decision last week is a victory for the common good for Mass DEP. The plain language of the Act at Section 15.4 says not that there's a certain amount of safe water that the nuclear industry can designate, or the NRC, its captured regulatory body, rather that the standard is 0. It simply cannot be added. I'd moreover add, Mr. Chair, that these arguments also apply to gaseous discharge. Ms. Turco noted this in her testimony a few moments ago. I believe others have noted it elsewhere. I certainly think that's relevant. I'd also point to, with the note that I'm not a lawyer, to the Endangered Species Act, Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. In Section 2 of that act, it is prohibited to alter any significant habitat. In Section 1, alter is defined as a quote, to change the physical or biological condition of a habitat in any way that detrimentally affects the capacity of the habitat to support a population of endangered or threatened species, end quote. Significant habitat is likewise defined as, quote, specific areas of the Commonwealth designated in accordance with Section 4, in which are found the physical or biological features important to the conservation of a threatened or endangered species population. So the other important thing to note is that under the regulations pursuant to the Act, Duxbury, Kingston, and Plymouth Bays, as well as significant portions of Cape Cod Bay, are delineated as NHESP priority habitats. It's therefore appropriate for state officials, and I do think it would be the AGO, but again, I'm not a lawyer, to ensure that the laws are enforced and to see that no wastewater, whether in liquid or gaseous form, ends up in the bay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who do we have online, Mary?
Joanne, are you still online? Can you unmute her, please?
Okay. We're not hearing you at the moment.
My laptop just died. Ryan. Okay, thanks, Mike.
Joanne, are you there? Technological problems.
Oh, my laptop just died on me.
Okay, Joanne, I think unfortunately, we're in that world of technological problems. I apologize. If you're open in September, come on back and we'd be happy and hopefully technological problems will be solved. Yeah, and if you've got something to email us, please do so. I will respond. I think we've gotten to the point where I could ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Let's go down. Nichols?
Yes.
Mr. Gottlieb? Yes. Mr. Pickering?
Yes.
Priest? Adjourned? Mrs. Lambert?
Yes.
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 Mary, the three online?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
A unanimous vote. I love them. Thank you very much. See everybody in 2 months.
Okay.
Yep.